Throughout human history, we have done the best we could for ourselves in the face of being puzzled. So, for example, when some things consistently fall to the ground while other things consistently remain in the sky, we are understandably puzzled, and we look to come up with an explanation for why and how this should be so. The explanations we come up with between us will be many and varied, and they will all contradict each other to some extent or other. When nobody can disprove our own preferred explanations, and enough other people agree to agree with them, we will feel reassured, and our faith in these explanations will grow. This is how it goes, while the truth remains unknown. When, over time, we become overly invested in our explanations, any challenges to them will be perceived of as a threat to be defended against. Whether our explanation be a theory of space-time or a theory of God, we will look to protect it because it has served us well. And all the while, the actual truth of the matter, whatever it may be, continues to unfold as it always has. It is my contention that all of human culture, all around the world, all of it throughout human history, no exceptions, is fundamentally and enthusiastically based in lies. When I say all of it, I really do mean all of it, which means that I am saying that your culture, whatever you may perceive it to be, whether it be spiritually based, scientifically based, personality based, or whatever, your culture is based in lies. Even those of you who do not particularly identify as associating with any specific culture, you have your own culture. You do have your own personal culture. And it is my contention that your personal culture is based in lies. Even conspiracy theory culture, which dedicates itself to identifying the lies in our society, is based in lies. You may think that for me to hold this view must mean that I am an enormously critical and judgmental man. But that's not where I'm coming from. I have full empathy for all of our cultures being based in lies. It is my contention that for living beings such as us, who have developed to such a level of complexity that we even have culture, it is not the discovery of the deepest and most complex truths of our existence that is our problem, but the identification of the deepest and simplest truths of our existence in particular, of existence in general. We humans are incredibly complex, and we think in complex ways. When we have not yet worked out the very simplest of things, we come up with complex solutions to not knowing the simplest things. Let me repeat that. Because this is why I am not judgmental about us building our cultures on lies. When we have not yet worked out the very simplest of things, we come up with complex solutions for not knowing the simplest things. And where is the fault in that? Human lie culture all around the world is our complex solution to us not yet having identified the simplest truths of existence, the simplest truths that explain existence, the simplest truths that cause and regulate existence. This is my contention. This is the case that I am putting forward. I've been making videos about this since 2020. In my work, I explain how there can be no such thing as less than nothing, and no such thing as a negative number as we have defined them. And it is so simple and easy. In my work, I explain how, in existential terms, there's no such thing as absolute nothing anywhere. And it is so simple, so easy. In my work, I explain why there is no such thing as space-time as being a physical phenomenon. And it is so easy and simple. In my work, I explain exactly what the mechanism of consciousness is, and exactly why it is that we are the eternal. And it is easy. It is simple. In my work, I explain how the term God is a misconception in which we identify our own higher self as somebody else. And it is so simple. And all of this work I release into the public domain and make available for free to anybody and everybody to do with as they please. This is how I prove myself. I prove myself by doing the very simplest, easiest of things that humanity has needed to be done throughout the entirety of human history, but has not ever been done, and then simply asking the question, why? Why has it taken all of these thousands of years and a man who only got a B in maths at high school and an E in physics to point out the very simplest and easiest to understand of understandings to us all? Why? And then I give you the answer to that question. And it is simple. So simple. There are truths that cannot not be true. Truths that are existentially incapable of not being true. This is the only possible reason for existence at all. And it is the only possible reason for anybody or anything to be eternal. You only need to think about it. And you don't even need to think about it for very long, because it is so very simple and self-evident. Anybody for whom it feels important to debunk this heretical man claiming to know physics, you will need to do your due diligence and make sure that what you do say about me and the things I say are true before you go ahead, because people will notice if you don't. They will notice. I recommend that you equip yourself with the highest levels of self-honesty you can muster before committing yourself to your argument. It's the least you can do for yourself. These days, our theoretical physicists build bigger and bigger devices in order to investigate the behaviors of smaller and smaller examples of physicality. Even as they do this, they simultaneously claim that true foundational understanding is very probably a complete impossibility. Are there any physicists now who even pretend to believe their study of the quantum realm can enlighten us on the reason for, the cause of existence anymore? They observe physical interactions and try to make sense of them, and this proves useful for engineering, which is fair enough. And that is pretty much it, so far as it goes for the usefulness of our physicists. This video is one of two. In the other, I focus on our complex solutions to not knowing the simplest truths that are spiritually and religiously based. In this video, my focus is on our complex solutions to not knowing the simplest truths that are scientifically based. In this video, I will explain why there is no such thing as space-time and why it matters so very much. Let's get into it. Wikipedia has this to say about space-time. Space-time is a mathematical model that fuses the 3 dimensions of space with the 1 dimension of time into a single 4-dimensional continuum. As a definition of space-time, I have no problem with this at all. Space-time is a mathematical model. No problem. My issue comes into play when, somewhere along the line, the 3 spatial dimensions that we do actually live in are said to possess physical properties of their own, such as shape and density. To go from space-time being a mathematical model to being seen as a physical model, it's not just an unwarranted leap. It is an error in reasoning that is catastrophic when it comes to helping us understand how reality works. It is as wrong as saying that objects look smaller the further away they are because objects actually physically become smaller the further away they get. The mistake our theoretical physicists seem to make is that because gravity cannot be detected, only observed as an effect, and because the spatial dimensions cannot be observed directly, but only as a relative effect, they must somehow be the same thing. But the reason that gravity cannot be detected is because it is not there. If there were a force capable of pulling objects of varying size and weight to the ground, we would be able to detect it. There's no way, given our technological progress, that we wouldn't. The reason we can't detect gravity is because it simply is not a force that pulls. It is an effect, not a thing in and of itself, just as the spatial dimensions are an effect, not a thing. Gravity is an effect of the expansion of the iteration of truth. Most theoretical physicists will know what I'm talking about here. They simply will not agree with me, for various unfortunate reasons. To define space-time as a thing rather than a model or an effect is to be wrong. So let's just pause and think about what we are talking about here when we accurately define space-time as a mathematical model. What is its application? What is this mathematical model for? Its application is to analyze the spatial and temporal behavior of physical phenomena relative to physical phenomena. This is its application. This is what it is for. We can say this safely because the moment we take physical phenomena out of the model, we no longer have any frame of reference whatsoever. All we have is a statement. The statement that in this moment here, there are 3 spatial dimensions, and in the next moment, we have 3 spatial dimensions, and the next, and the next, and the next, and so on. This is all that can happen inside our mathematical model if there are no physical phenomena to act as a relative frame of reference. When we do have physical phenomena present within the model, we can observe how these phenomena are behaving relative to each other. So, for example, if a physical phenomenon we are observing is shrinking or expanding over time, it must be shrinking or expanding relative to some other physical phenomenon. Otherwise, we will not be able to tell it is shrinking or expanding. Yes? When we observe that the relative distance between 2 objects is decreasing, this only means that the 2 objects are moving closer to each other. It does not mean the 3 spatial dimensions between them are shrinking. It does not mean that. When we throw a baseball and track the curve of its rise and fall through the air, we are not tracking the curving of the 3 spatial dimensions. We are tracking the movement of the ball over time relative to the position of the ground, within the context of the 3 spatial dimensions. This is what we are observing. Whether we are employing the mathematical model of space-time or not. And just so when we are observing one object orbit another. The difficulty for us in lie culture is the lack of any form of foundation when it comes to knowing what is happening. We are highly complex beings living in a highly complex world and our thought processes, when we try to reverse engineer our empirical observations of our highly complex world towards something we could describe as foundational understanding, well, they tend to be highly complex. The very opposite of what a foundation must be. So, for example, you will get a highly respected thinker such as Bertrand Russell taking 360 pages to allegedly prove that 1 plus 1 always equals 2. And a highly respected thinker such as Albert Einstein claiming that the three spatial dimensions become curved in order for the orbiting of celestial bodies to be explained. These were, clearly, two very clever men. I would not dispute their cleverness for a second. But being clever does not mean that you are correct, and it does not mean that you cannot think poorly. If it takes you 360 pages to explain why 1 plus 1 equals 2, you are thinking poorly. If you decide that the three spatial dimensions must be capable of being curved in order to explain gravity, and that gravity explains why objects both fall to the ground and don't fall to the ground, you are thinking poorly, regardless of how clever you may be. The issue is not cleverness, it is lie culture, which does not understand the simplest, most foundational truths, and becomes overly invested in its own highly complex and poorly thought out workarounds for not knowing the truth. The truth is that until one does have a foundation, which is an accurate understanding of the simplest, most underlying of truths, one cannot understand anything that is emergent from those foundational truths. And we and our lie culture do not have a foundational understanding. Do not even pretend to have one. Which means we do not actually understand anything at all about what is going on anywhere in any real sense. All we really have to date is empirical observation of the physical, which is good for one thing, and that one thing is engineering. The reason there are three spatial dimensions is because it is impossible for there not to be. Try to take even one of them away and see what happens. The reason there is such a thing as the passage of time is because it is impossible for one moment not to be followed by the next. Try to take away the next moment and see what happens. These two foundational, always in effect everywhere truths are not allowed by lie culture. Try to convince a theoretical physicist of this and see what happens. Try to convince a theoretical physicist that truths that are always in effect everywhere are true, and see what happens. Our culture is so invested in its own lies that it can only double down on them, no matter how helpful allowing these truths to be recognized as the truths that they are would be. This is catastrophe for us. That truths that are literally always in effect everywhere are not allowed to be recognized as true. This is catastrophic for us. We live together amidst this catastrophe and are just so used to it that we accept it and double down on it ourselves. Like people who only long to live in a kind world, but don't want to be the first to be kind.